The crystal stemware caught the candlelight as I set down my glass. Around me, the Friday evening crowd at Bellissimo fell into an uncomfortable silence. My brother Marcus stood 6 feet away, his face flushed with anger, one hand pointing toward the door while the other gestured frantically at the security guard stationed near the bar. "I mean it, Catherine," Marcus said, his voice carrying across the dining room. "You're embarrassing yourself. This isn't some diner where you can nurse a single glass of house wine all night." I dabbed my napkin against my lips, taking my time. The pasta primavera I'd ordered sat half-finished on the plate before me. Around us, wealthy patrons in designer clothing whispered behind their hands, smartphones already emerging from purses and pockets. In the age of social media, a scene like this would be online within minutes. "Marcus, please," our mother's voice came from the corner booth where she sat with our father and Marcus's wife, Jennifer. "Can't we discuss this privately?" "No, Mom." Marcus strode toward my small table near the kitchen. "I've been patient long enough. Catherine shows up here twice a week, orders the cheapest items on the menu and sits for hours like she owns the place. It's affecting business. People are starting to talk." I remained seated, my hands folded calmly in my lap. Marcus had always been like this, dramatic, quick to anger, desperate to assert dominance. When we were children, he'd been the golden boy, the one who brought home perfect report cards and athletic trophies. I'd been the quiet one, the daughter our parents politely introduced but never bragged about. "I'm a paying customer," I said softly. "My money is as good as anyone else's." "Your money?" Marcus laughed, and several nearby diners shifted uncomfortably. "You work part-time at some bookstore, Catherine. You live in a studio apartment in the warehouse district. You drive a 15-year-old Honda with a cracked windshield. Don't pretend you belong in a restaurant like this." The security guard, a young man named Thomas who'd worked at Bellissimo for about 3 months, approached hesitantly. I'd seen him around, always professional, always courteous. Now he looked torn between following orders and making a scene. "Ma'am," Thomas said quietly, "I'm going to have to ask you to leave." I nodded slowly, reaching for my purse, but I didn't stand. "Not yet. You know what your problem is, Catherine," Marcus continued, warming to his audience. Several tables had stopped eating entirely, watching the drama unfold. "You've never accepted your place in life. Some people are meant to build empires. Others are meant to serve them. You could have been happy working retail, finding some simple guy to marry, living a simple life. But no, you always had to pretend you were something special." Jennifer, Marcus's wife, glanced away uncomfortably. She'd always been kind to me, one of the few people in the family who didn't treat me like a failure. But she said nothing now, her loyalty to her husband outweighing any sympathy she might have felt. "Remember when you said you were starting a business?" Marcus pressed on. "Some ridiculous consulting thing. We all knew it would fail, that's why Dad refused to invest. He didn't want to throw good money after bad." Our father, Richard Sterling, sat ramrod straight in the corner booth, his silver hair perfectly styled, his three-piece suit immaculate even at the end of a long day. He'd built Sterling Manufacturing from nothing, creating a mid-sized industrial parts company that employed 300 people. Marcus had joined the company straight out of business school, grooming himself to take over when Dad retired. I had not been offered a position. When I'd asked, at 22, fresh from college, Dad had suggested I find my own path and not rely on family connections. "So I had the security guard as waiting," Marcus said, his tone shifting from angry to smugly satisfied. "Are you going to leave with dignity, or do we need to make this worse?" I took a slow breath, looking around the restaurant. Bellissimo occupied a converted brownstone in the historic district, 3 stories of elegant Italian dining that had become the city's premier destination for celebrations, business dinners, and romantic evenings. The exposed brick walls held original artwork. The floors were reclaimed wood, polished to a honey-colored shine. The kitchen, visible through a glass partition, gleamed with professional-grade stainless steel equipment. It had taken me 3 years to find this property, another 2 years to complete the renovations. The architectural firm I'd hired had won an award for the adaptive reuse design. "Marcus," I said calmly, "do you know who owns Bellissimo?" He blinked, thrown off by the question. "What?" "The restaurant. Do you know who owns it?" "I do," he said, recovering quickly. "Antonio Russo, the head chef. Everyone knows that. He's a culinary genius who trained in Milan. He opened Bellissimo 5 years ago, and it's been the hottest reservation in the city ever since. I nodded slowly. And how do you know this? It's common knowledge. It's been in magazines, newspapers. There was a whole profile in Food and Wine about Chef Antonio's journey from Italy to here, how he saved for 20 years to open his dream restaurant. Have you ever actually asked Chef Antonio who owns Bellissimo? Marcus's eyes narrowed. What are you getting at, Catherine? I'm simply curious, I said, about how certain you are of your facts. I'm certain enough, Marcus snapped. Now stop stalling and leave before I have Thomas physically remove you. Thomas shifted his weight uncomfortably. Sir, maybe we should do your job, Marcus cut him off. Or find employment elsewhere. That was when the kitchen door swung open. Chef Antonio Russo was a compact man in his late 50s, with silver hair, sharp dark eyes, and the confident bearing of someone who'd spent 40 years perfecting his craft. He wore his white chef's coat with the same dignity other men wore tuxedos. In his hands, he carried a black leather portfolio, the kind lawyers used for important documents. The dining room's energy shifted instantly. Several regulars recognized him. Chef Antonio rarely left his kitchen during service. When he did, it was significant. Mr. Sterling, Antonio said, his Italian accent adding weight to each word. I need to speak with you. Not now, Antonio. Marcus said dismissively. I'm dealing with a family matter. It's precisely because it's a family matter that we need to speak. Antonio replied. He walked past Marcus, approaching my table with the same careful attention he gave his signature osso buco. Miss Catherine, good evening. Good evening, Antonio. I said warmly. How is the kitchen tonight? Busy, very busy. We have a full house, as you can see. He set the leather portfolio on my table, his movements deliberate. I thought perhaps it was time to clarify some confusion. Marcus stepped closer. Antonio, I appreciate your loyalty to the Sterling name, but my sister isn't family in the way that matters for business. She's not involved with Sterling Manufacturing. She has no claim to Mr. Sterling, Antonio interrupted. His voice sharp enough to cut through Marcus's bluster. Do you know how I was able to open Bellissimo? Marcus frowned. You saved your money. You're a successful chef. I am a successful chef, yes. But chefs, even successful ones, rarely have the capital to purchase a historic brownstone in the city's most expensive district, renovate it completely, and stock it with the finest kitchen equipment money can buy. Do you know how much this building cost? I assume you took out loans, Marcus said, but uncertainty had crept into his voice. I took out nothing, Antonio said. He opened the leather portfolio, removing a stack of documents. This restaurant, Mr. Sterling, was purchased by Meridian Property Holdings LLC. The total investment, including purchase price, renovation, and initial operating costs, was approximately $4.2 million. The dining room had gone completely silent. Even the servers had stopped moving, standing frozen with trays balanced on their hands. Meridian Property Holdings is a private investment company, Antonio continued. It was founded 7 years ago by a young entrepreneur who specialized in identifying undervalued commercial properties, renovating them, and creating successful businesses. This company owns 17 properties across the city, including this restaurant, the Monroe Street mixed-use development, and the Riverside Towers apartment complex. Marcus's face had gone pale. What does this have to do with everything? Antonio said softly. He turned the documents around, sliding them across the table toward Marcus. Because Meridian Property Holdings is wholly owned by your sister. Catherine Sterling is my employer. She is the owner of Bellissimo. She has been since the day we opened our doors. The silence that followed felt absolute. I could hear the kitchen exhaust fan humming. Someone's phone buzzed. A wine glass clinked against a plate. Marcus stared at the documents, like they were written in a foreign language. That's impossible. The deed is public record, I said quietly. As are the LLC registration documents, the business licenses, and the renovation permits. You could have looked them up at any time. But you, Marcus's voice trailed off. He looked at me, really looked at me, perhaps for the first time in years. You work at a bookstore. I own a bookstore, I corrected. Novel Ideas on Maple Street. It's one of my smaller investments, but I enjoy it. Books have always brought me peace. Our mother had risen from the corner booth, her hand pressed to her chest. Catherine, is this true? Every word, I said. But when? Mom's voice cracked slightly. How? Do you remember when I said I was starting a consulting business? I asked, directing the question to the whole family. It wasn't consulting, it was property investment. I started small, a duplex that needed work, in a neighborhood people had written off. I bought it for $35,000, spent $10,000 on renovations, and rented both units. The cash flow was modest, but it was mine. I took a sip of water, collecting my thoughts. The dining room remained silent, dozens of strangers listening to my family's private drama. But I'd been silent for too long. If Marcus wanted a public confrontation, he would get the full truth. I bought another property, 6 months later. I continued. Then another. I learned everything I could about real estate law, property management, building codes, neighborhood development patterns. I worked 70-hour weeks, 40 hours at various jobs to pay my bills, and another 30 hours managing my growing portfolio. Why didn't you tell us? Dad's voice came from the corner, quiet and strained. I tried, I said, meeting his eyes. Do you remember my 24th birthday dinner? I told you I'd bought my fifth property. You laughed and said playing Monopoly with real buildings was a good way to go bankrupt. You told me to get a real job before I ended up homeless. Dad's face flushed, but he said nothing. I stopped trying to share my successes after that, I said. It was easier to let you think I was struggling. You all seemed more comfortable with that version of me. Jennifer had tears in her eyes. Catherine, I'm so sorry. Don't be, I said, and I meant it. This wasn't about revenge or proving anyone wrong. I built my business because I loved it, because I was good at it. Your opinions, while hurtful, didn't change what I knew I could accomplish. Marcus finally found his voice. So all this time, while we thought you were barely scraping by, you were secretly wealthy. I'm comfortable, I said carefully. Meridian's total assets are valued at approximately $47 million. My personal net worth is around $12 million, though it fluctuates with market conditions and property values. Mom sat down heavily, her hand gripping the edge of the table for support. 12 million, Marcus repeated numbly. Give or take, I said. I don't obsess over the exact figures. The properties generate reliable income, and I reinvest most of it. The goal was never wealth for its own sake. It was about creating something meaningful. Antonio cleared his throat gently. Miss Catherine, should I have Thomas escort your brother from the premises? The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Thomas had gone rigid, his face cycling through embarrassment, confusion, and what looked like suppressed laughter. That won't be necessary, I said. Marcus, you're welcome to finish your dinner. So are Mom, Dad, and Jennifer. You're my family. I don't want you to leave. But Marcus struggled with the words. I just tried to have you thrown out of your own restaurant. Yes, I acknowledged. You did, and you've spent years treating me like a failure, like someone beneath your notice, like an embarrassment to the sterling name. That hurt, Marcus. It hurt more than you'll probably ever understand. Catherine, I held up my hand. Let me finish. You've hurt me, but you're still my brother. And despite everything, I don't hate you. I actually pity you a little. Marcus flinched as if I'd struck him. You've spent your whole life performing. I continued. Being the perfect son, the perfect businessman, the perfect heir to Dad's company. You measure your worth by what others think of you, by the size of your office, by the prestige of the restaurants you dine at. You called security on me because having a poor sister in your restaurant damaged the image you've built. I stood slowly, leaving cash on the table, more than enough to cover my meal, and a generous tip. Old habits. I built my business in silence, because I didn't need applause, I said. I didn't need Dad's approval or your acknowledgement. I needed to prove something to myself. And I did. Antonio handed me the leather portfolio. Your office called earlier. The Monroe Street project needs your signature on the final permits. Thank you, Antonio. I'll handle it tomorrow. I turned to the dining room, suddenly aware of the dozens of eyes watching me. I apologize to everyone for the disruption. Please, enjoy your meals. Everything is excellent here. Chef Antonio is truly brilliant. A few people applauded. Someone called out, "You go, girl." Another voice said, "Can I invest in your next project?" I smiled but didn't respond. At the corner booth, Dad had his head in his hands. Mom was crying quietly. Jennifer looked shell-shocked. Marcus stood frozen in the middle of the dining room, the ownership documents still clutched in his hands. "Catherine," he said hoarsely, "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything tonight," I replied. "Process this. Think about it. We can talk later, when emotions aren't so raw. Will you forgive me?" I considered the question carefully. "I don't know yet. Forgiveness takes time, Marcus. You've spent years making me feel small. You can't undo that with an apology." "But is it possible?" he pressed. Could we start over?" "Maybe," I said honestly. "But it would require you to actually see me, Marcus. Not as the sister who failed to live up to your standards, but as a person who took a different path and succeeded on her own terms." I started toward the door, but paused next to Thomas, the security guard. "Thomas, you're not fired," I said quietly. "You were following what you believed were legitimate instructions from a customer. But in the future, if anyone asks you to remove someone from Bellissimo, please check with Chef Antonio or the general manager first." "Yes, ma'am," Thomas said, his face bright red. "I'm really sorry, I had no idea." "It's fine," I assured him. "Really?" As I walked through the dining room, conversations slowly resumed. The kitchen noise picked back up. Life at Bellissimo continued, because good restaurants were resilient, built on strong foundations. I stepped out into the cool evening air, the city lights reflecting off the wet pavement from an earlier rain. My Honda, yes, still with the cracked windshield, sat in a parking spot 3 blocks away. I'd kept the car because it ran perfectly well, and replacing it felt wasteful. The studio apartment Marcus had mocked was actually a loft I owned in a building I'd renovated 2 years ago. I lived there because I loved the exposed brick and the natural light, not because I couldn't afford something larger. My phone buzzed. A text from Jennifer. "I'm so proud of you. Always have been." Another from Mom. "Please call me when you're ready. We need to talk." Nothing from Dad or Marcus yet. That was fine. Some revelations needed time to settle. I walked slowly toward my car, passing other restaurants, boutiques, and coffee shops. 3 of the buildings on this block belonged to Meridian Property Holdings. Most people walking by had no idea. The LLC structure kept my name out of public records. Antonio knew, of course, as did the managers of my other properties. My lawyer knew. My accountant knew. But I'd never sought publicity. Never wanted recognition. Until tonight, when Marcus forced my hand. I wondered what would happen now. Would Dad try to bring me into Sterling Manufacturing, suddenly seeing value in a daughter he'd dismissed? Would Marcus struggle with the reversal, or would he find a way to grow from it? Would our family relationships survive this revelation, or had the years of dismissal created cracks too deep to repair? I didn't have answers. But I had something more valuable. The certainty that I'd built something real, something lasting, something that didn't depend on anyone's approval but my own. My phone rang. "Antonio." "Miss Catherine, I wanted to apologize for the scene. If I had known your brother would." "You have nothing to apologize for," I said. "You handled it perfectly. Your family is still here," he said carefully. "Your father asked to speak with me. He wants to know about your investments, about the business. Tell him whatever you're comfortable sharing." I said. "I'm not hiding anymore." "Are you sure? This could bring unwanted attention." I thought about that. The smartphones recording in the restaurant. The story that would spread through the city's social networks. The possibility that business publications might pick it up. Local entrepreneur, revealed to own significant real estate portfolio. I'm sure, I said. Let it come. I built this business properly. Legally. Ethically. I have nothing to hide. Very well, Antonio said. And Miss Catherine, for what it's worth, I'm honored to work for you. Bellissimo is my dream. Yes, but you made it possible. You believed in my vision when no one else would invest. I will never forget that. We make a good team, I said warmly. You create the magic. I just provide the space for it to happen. After we hung up, I sat in my car for a long moment, not starting the engine. Through the restaurant windows, I could see my family still at their table. Dad was talking animatedly, his hands moving in the gestures he used when discussing business. Mom leaned forward, listening intently. Marcus sat very still. The documents spread before him. Jennifer had her phone out, probably researching Meridian Property Holdings, finding the public records that confirmed everything I'd said. They were processing, learning, adjusting to a reality where the family failure was actually the family's most successful member. I started the car. The engine turned over smoothly. Old but well maintained. Like everything in my life, I took care of what mattered. The drive back to my loft took 15 minutes. I parked in the underground garage, rode the elevator to the 4th floor, and let myself into the space I'd carefully designed. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the river. The kitchen had professional-grade appliances I rarely used. The bedroom was separated by a Japanese screen I'd found at an estate sale. Simple, comfortable, mine. I poured a glass of wine, something better than the house wine I ordered at Bellissimo to maintain my cover, and sat by the windows, watching the city lights reflect on the dark water. My phone buzzed again. Marcus this time. I need to understand. His text read, "Can we meet? Just the two of us." I stared at the message for a long time. Part of me wanted to say no. To let him sit with his embarrassment, to make him feel a fraction of what I'd felt all these years. But I was tired of holding grudges. Tired of pretending to be less than I was. Sunday morning. I typed back. Coffee at Novel Ideas. 9 a.m. His response came immediately. I'll be there. And Catherine? Thank you. I set the phone aside and returned to the window. Somewhere out there, in 17 different buildings across this city, people lived and worked in spaces I'd created. Families raised children in apartments I'd renovated. Entrepreneurs built businesses in commercial spaces I'd developed. Antonio served exquisite meals in a restaurant I'd made possible. That was the real measure of success. Not the dollar figures in my accounts, but the lives my work touched. Marcus had called me an embarrassment. Said I didn't belong. But I'd belonged all along. I'd just belonged to something bigger than his narrow definition of success. The wine was excellent, a Barolo from a small vineyard Antonio had introduced me to. I savored it slowly, watching the city I'd quietly helped build, one property at a time. Tomorrow things would change. The secret would be out. My family would adjust, or they wouldn't. Media might call. Other investors might reach out. But tonight I simply sat with the satisfaction of knowing I'd built something real, something lasting, something that didn't require anyone's permission but my own. And that, more than any net worth statement or property deed, was what true success felt like. The following morning arrived with pale sunlight filtering through my loft windows. I'd slept poorly, my mind replaying the scene at Bellissimo, anticipating the conversation with Marcus, wondering how fundamentally the family dynamic had shifted. My phone showed 43 missed messages. I scrolled through them over coffee, French press, beans from a roaster in the building I owned on 7th Street. Several were from property managers with routine questions. 2 were from my lawyer, marked urgent. 1 was from a journalist at the Business Chronicle. 3 were from former college friends who'd apparently heard about last night through the social media grapevine. And 7 were from family members. I dealt with the business items first. A plumbing issue at Monroe Street, permit questions about the Riverside project, a prospective tenant for one of my commercial spaces. This was the work most people never saw, the daily operations that kept 17 properties running smoothly. The lawyer's messages were about the upcoming acquisition, I'd been quietly negotiating to purchase the old Hartman Hotel, a historic building that had been empty for 3 years. The owner had finally agreed to my terms. Contracts needed review before Tuesday's closing. I sent a quick reply confirming I'd stop by Monday afternoon. The journalist's message I deleted. If they wanted a statement, they could go through official channels. I had no interest in becoming a local celebrity. The family messages I saved for last. Mom, sweetheart, I couldn't sleep. We need to talk. I had no idea what you'd accomplished. Please forgive us. Jennifer. Marcus was up all night. He's devastated. Please be gentle with him tomorrow. Dad, Catherine. Sunday dinner at the house. 6 p.m. We need to discuss your business. I may have been wrong about some things. That last message made me smile despite myself. May have been wrong was the closest Dad came to admitting error. My sister Victoria, whom I hadn't seen at Bellissimo, had sent a longer message. Just heard from Mom. Catherine, I'm floored. Why didn't you tell me? I would have been proud of you. I am proud of you. Can we talk? Victoria was 2 years older than me, 3 years younger than Marcus. She'd married young, moved to Seattle, started a family. We talked maybe twice a year, pleasant but distant conversations about nothing important. I responded to her first. I'd like that. Call when you have time. To Mom, I'm not angry, just tired of being underestimated. We'll talk soon. To Jennifer, meeting Marcus at 9. We'll work it out. To Dad, I'll come to dinner. But we're discussing family, not business. I don't mix the two. That was important. I wouldn't let Dad try to turn this into a business opportunity, a way to leverage my success for Sterling Manufacturing's benefit. My business was mine, built without family help, and it would stay that way. I spent the morning reviewing financial reports, checking property values, and researching the Hartman Hotel's history. The building had been constructed in 1924, a beautiful example of Art Deco architecture that had fallen into disrepair. My plan was to convert the upper floors into residential lofts, while restoring the ground floor to its original grandeur, perhaps a boutique hotel or event space. The numbers worked. They always did when I'd done my homework properly. At 8:30 I drove to Novel Ideas, the bookstore I'd purchased 4 years ago. The previous owner had been retiring, and I'd fallen in love with the space. High ceilings, original hardwood floors, and walls lined with books that smelled like paper and possibility. I'd kept the name and most of the staff, including Margaret, the 60-year-old manager, who knew more about literature than anyone I'd ever met. Morning, Catherine. Margaret called as I entered through the back door. Heard you had an interesting evening. News travels fast, I said, not particularly surprised. Margaret lived 3 blocks from Bellissimo. Half the neighborhood probably knew by now. Thomas, the security guard, is my nephew. Margaret said, grinning. He called me last night, absolutely mortified. Said he'd tried to throw his boss out of her own restaurant. I laughed despite myself. Poor Thomas. Is he okay? He'll survive. Learned an important lesson about assumptions. Margaret handed me a coffee. She always had a pot brewing. Your brother's outside. Showed up 20 minutes early, pacing like a condemned man. Through the front window, I could see Marcus walking back and forth on the sidewalk, checking his watch, running his hands through his hair. He wore jeans and a casual shirt. I'd never seen him in anything but business attire. He looked younger somehow, less polished, more human. Should I let him in? Margaret asked. Give me 5 minutes to set up in the reading nook, I said. The reading nook was my favorite part of Novel Ideas. A corner space with comfortable chairs, good lighting, and floor-to-ceiling windows, overlooking the street. I'd hosted book clubs here, writers' workshops, and quiet mornings reading while the city woke up around me. I settled into one of the chairs, my coffee on the small table between the seats. At exactly 9 o'clock, Margaret unlocked the front door. Marcus entered slowly, taking in the bookstore with obvious surprise. You really do own this place. I really do, I confirmed. Have a seat. He sat carefully, like the chair might collapse under him. Catherine, I've been up all night trying to figure out what to say. I've written and deleted a dozen texts. I've rehearsed speeches. And now that I'm here, I realize nothing I've prepared is adequate. Then just talk. I suggested. No speech, no rehearsal, just honest conversation. He nodded, taking a shaky breath. I was cruel to you last night, and it wasn't the first time. I've been cruel to you for years, in ways big and small. I dismissed your accomplishments, mocked your choices, treated you like you were beneath me. Yes, I said simply. You did all those things. I don't have an excuse. Marcus continued. I could say I was projecting my own insecurities, or that Dad's expectations put too much pressure on me, or that I was just following the family pattern. But those are explanations, not excuses. I hurt you, repeatedly. Deliberately. I sipped my coffee, letting him talk. When Antonio showed me those documents last night, when I realized what you'd built, I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. Marcus said, everything I thought I knew about you, about our family, about success, it all shifted. And the worst part wasn't that you'd succeeded. It was that you'd succeeded while I was actively tearing you down. Why did you do it? I asked. Tear me down, I mean. What did you gain from making me feel small? Marcus was quiet for a long moment. It made me feel bigger, he finally admitted. Dad always held me up as the example. Marcus the achiever. Marcus the future of Sterling manufacturing. But it was exhausting, Catherine. Every report card had to be perfect. Every athletic competition had to be won. Every business decision had to prove I was worthy of the legacy. So you created a comparison point, I said, understanding. If I was the failure, you were the success. My struggles validated your achievements. God, that sounds terrible when you say it out loud. It is terrible, I agreed. But at least it's honest. I'm sorry, Marcus said, and his voice cracked. I'm so sorry. For last night, for the years before it, for every dismissive comment and condescending look. You deserved better from me. You deserved better from all of us. I set down my coffee cup. Marcus, do you know why I never told the family about my success? Because we wouldn't have believed you. Partly, I said, but mostly because I realized that your opinions of me said more about you than they did about me. Dad's refusal to invest wasn't about my business plan. It was about his limited vision of what success looks like. Your mockery wasn't about my failures. It was about your need to feel superior. Mom's disappointment wasn't about my choices. It was about her attachment to a specific picture of what her daughter's life should be. We all failed you, Marcus said quietly.
You did.
I acknowledged. But I also freed myself from needing your validation. I built Meridian Property Holdings because I loved the work, not to prove anything to you. That independence, that self-sufficiency, it's been the greatest gift of my life. Then why did you reveal everything last night? Marcus asked. You could have continued letting us think you were struggling. Why expose the truth? I smiled slightly. Because you called security on me in my own restaurant, Marcus. There's humble, and then there's being thrown out of a property I own. That crossed a line. He winced. Fair point. Also, I continued more seriously. I'm tired of hiding. It served a purpose for a while, protecting my business from family interference, giving me space to build something independent. But I don't want to spend the rest of my life pretending to be less than I am. That's exhausting in its own way. So what happens now? Marcus asked. With us, I mean. With the family. That depends, I said. Are you willing to actually change? Or are you just sorry you got caught treating me poorly? I want to change, Marcus said immediately, then paused. But I don't know if I know how. This dynamic, me as the golden child, you as the disappointment. It's been our reality for so long. How do we build something different? We start by being honest, I said. No more performances, no more pretending. If you're struggling at Sterling Manufacturing, say so. If you need help, ask for it. If you're proud of something I've done, tell me. I am proud, Marcus said. What you've built. $12 million in personal net worth, 17 properties, all while we thought you were barely getting by. That's incredible, Catherine. That's actually more impressive than anything I've done. Don't do that, I said firmly. Don't turn this into a competition where I win and you lose. That's the same dynamic, just reversed. We're not in competition, Marcus. We never were. You're right, he said. Old habits. We sat in silence for a moment. Outside the window, the neighborhood was waking up. Dog walkers passing by, a young couple pushing a stroller, an elderly man buying a newspaper from the corner stand. Can I ask you something? Marcus said. How did you do it? Build all this while working part-time jobs and living in a studio apartment. I didn't sleep much, I said honestly. For the first 5 years, I averaged 4 hours a night. I worked my day jobs to cover personal expenses, then spent evenings and weekends managing properties, meeting with contractors, studying market trends. I missed parties, dates, social events. I lived below my means, even when I could afford better, because every dollar not spent was a dollar I could invest. That sounds lonely. Sometimes it was, I admitted, but it was also purposeful. I knew what I was building toward, and I had some good people around me. Margaret here at the bookstore, Antonio at Bellissimo, the property managers who became partners in the work. I wasn't as alone as you might think. While I was out having expensive dinners and joining exclusive clubs, Marcus said slowly, you were building an empire. Different paths, I said. Neither is inherently better. You've built relationships in the business community. You've developed skills at Sterling Manufacturing. You have Jennifer and a good marriage. Those things have value too, but they didn't cost me anything. Marcus said, Dad gave me the Sterling Manufacturing position. The expensive dinners were on company cards. The clubs were family memberships. I've never built anything from nothing the way you have. So build something now, I suggested. You're 34 years old, Marcus. You have experience, connections, and presumably some savings. If you want to prove something to yourself, do it. Would you help me? I considered the question carefully. What kind of help are you asking for? I don't know, he admitted. Advice maybe. I don't expect you to invest in anything I do, or to give me some kind of shortcut. But you've learned things about business, about building something sustainable. I'd like to learn from you. If you're willing to teach, we could do that, I said slowly. But it would require you to genuinely listen, not just wait for your turn to talk. And it would require you to accept that my way of doing business might be different from what you learned at Sterling Manufacturing. I can do that, Marcus said. I want to do that. Then we can try, I said. But Marcus, we need to be clear about something. My business stays mine. I won't be bringing you into Meridian Property Holdings. I won't be investing in Sterling Manufacturing. Those boundaries are important. I understand, he said, and I respect that. You built this independently. You should keep it that way. Margaret appeared with fresh coffee. Sorry to interrupt, but we're opening in 10 minutes. Thought you might want refills before the Saturday crowd arrives. Thank you, Margaret, I said, accepting the cup. After she left, Marcus smiled slightly. She's protective of you. She's a good friend, I said. When I bought this place, I told her I'd keep her on as manager if she wanted to stay. She said she'd stay on one condition, that I never let the business side overwhelm the love of books, that I'd remember why bookstores matter, beyond just the profit margins. Smart woman. Very, I agreed. She's taught me as much about running a good business as any MBA program could have. Marcus checked his watch. I should probably go. Let you get ready for opening. But Catherine, thank you for agreeing to meet me, for giving me a chance to apologize, for being willing to try to rebuild something between us. Sunday dinner at Mom and Dad's. I reminded him. 6 o'clock. I assume you'll be there. Wouldn't miss it, he said. Though I imagine it's going to be an interesting conversation. Probably, I said. Dad wants to discuss my business. I told him we'd discuss family instead. Marcus grinned. I'd pay money to see his face when you told him that. You'll see it tomorrow, I said. When I tell him again. We stood, and Marcus hesitated, like he wanted to hug me, but wasn't sure if that would be welcome. I solved the problem by extending my hand. He shook it, his grip firm but not aggressive. See you tomorrow, Catherine. See you tomorrow, Marcus. After he left, I helped Margaret prepare the bookstore for opening. It was a Saturday ritual I enjoyed. straightening shelves, brewing fresh coffee for the reading nook, setting out the new arrivals display. That looked like a productive conversation, Margaret observed as we worked. It was a start, I said. We'll see if it leads anywhere. He seems genuinely sorry. I think he is, I agreed. But sorry and changed are two different things. Time will tell which one he manages. The rest of Saturday passed in the pleasant rhythm of bookstore work. I helped customers find recommendations, processed online orders, and spent an hour in the children's section reading to a group of kindergartners. This was the other side of my business empire. The human side, the community side, the part that couldn't be measured in property values or rental income. Sunday morning I woke early and went for a run along the river. The city was quiet, the water reflecting clouds and early sunlight. I thought about the coming dinner, about what I wanted to say to my parents, about how to navigate the new family dynamic. By 6 o'clock, I was pulling into my parents' driveway in the suburbs. The house I'd grown up in looked the same, colonial style, perfectly landscaped, the kind of home that appeared in magazines about successful living. Marcus's car was already there. So was Victoria's rental. Apparently she'd flown in from Seattle for this conversation. Mom answered the door, pulling me into a tight hug before I'd even stepped inside. Catherine, oh sweetheart. Hi Mom. I've been terrible, she said, tears already forming. All these years I've been so terrible to you. Let's talk about it inside, I suggested gently. The dining room table was set for 6. Mom, Dad, Marcus, Jennifer, Victoria and me. The good china was out, the crystal stemware, the formal place settings. Mom had prepared her signature pot roast, the meal she made for important family occasions. Everyone was already seated when I entered. Victoria jumped up immediately, crossing the room to embrace me. $12 million, she whispered in my ear. You absolute badass. I laughed despite the tension. It's good to see you too, Vic. We settled into our seats. Dad sat at the head of the table, Mom at the foot, Marcus and Jennifer on one side, Victoria and me on the other. The family configuration we'd maintained for decades. Dad cleared his throat. Catherine, your mother and I have been discussing. Before we start, I interrupted gently. I want to be clear about something. I came here to have a family dinner, not a business meeting. If you want to discuss Meridian Property Holdings as a business opportunity, we can schedule something through my lawyer. Dad blinked, thrown off his prepared speech. I wasn't trying to. You were, I said, not unkindly. You wanted to know about my investments, my properties, my business strategy. You wanted to figure out how to leverage my success for Sterling Manufacturing's benefit. That's your instinct, Dad. You're a businessman. You see opportunities. Is that so wrong? He asked defensively. It's not wrong, I said. But it's not why I'm here. I'm here because Mom asked me to come to a family dinner. So let's have a family dinner. Mom served the pot roast with shaking hands. For several minutes we ate in uncomfortable silence. Finally Victoria spoke. I'll start. Catherine, I'm sorry I wasn't there for you. I moved to Seattle and built my own life. And I let our relationship become these surface-level phone calls a couple times a year. I should have paid more attention. I should have noticed what was happening. You had your own life to build, I said. I don't blame you for that. Still, Victoria insisted. We're sisters. We should be closer than we are. I want to change that if you're willing. I'd like that, I said. Honestly. My turn, Jennifer said quietly. Catherine, I've watched Marcus treat you poorly for years. I told myself it wasn't my place to interfere, that it was between siblings. But I should have said something. I should have stood up for you. You were kind to me, I reminded her. That mattered more than you know. Mom was crying openly now. I don't know where to start, she said. I've been such a terrible mother to you, Catherine. I compared you to Marcus constantly. I expressed disappointment in your choices. I made you feel like you weren't enough. Mom, let me finish, she said, her voice thick with emotion. When you told us about your business ventures, I dismissed them. When you didn't join Sterling Manufacturing, I saw it as rejection rather than independence. I've spent years wishing you were different, when I should have been celebrating who you actually are. I forgive you, I said, and realized I meant it. All of you. I'm not interested in holding grudges, or making anyone grovel. What's done is done. The question is what we do now. Dad had been silent, through all of this, his food barely touched. Now he set down his fork with careful precision. I owe you an apology, he said, the words clearly difficult for him, and an explanation. When you asked to join Sterling Manufacturing, I said no because I was afraid. That surprised me. Afraid of what? Of you showing up, Marcus, he said bluntly. You were always the smarter one, Catherine. More creative, more driven, more willing to think outside conventional boxes. Marcus is good at following established procedures, at maintaining what's already been built. But you create, you innovate, you see possibilities others miss. Marcus had gone very still. If I'd brought you into the company, Dad continued, you would have transformed it, probably improved it dramatically, and in the process you would have overshadowed your brother. I told myself I was protecting the family business, but really I was protecting Marcus's ego, and my own vision of how succession should work. Dad, Marcus said quietly, I didn't know. You didn't need to know, Dad said. It was my failure, not yours. I limited both my children to protect outdated ideas about family and legacy. He turned back to me. Catherine, I can't undo the years of dismissing you. I can't reclaim the investment opportunity I missed when you started your business, but I can tell you that I'm proud of you. Genuinely deeply proud. You built something remarkable without any help from me. That takes more strength and vision than anything I've ever done. The room was silent, except for Mom's quiet crying. Thank you, I said simply. All of you, for the apologies, for the honesty. It helps. What do you need from us? Victoria asked. Going forward, I mean. How do we rebuild this? I thought about that question. I need you to see me, I said. Not as the daughter who disappointed you, or the sister who wasn't ambitious enough, or the failure who needed intervention. Just see me as I actually am. Someone who chose a different path and made it work. We can do that, Mom said firmly. And I need boundaries respected, I continued. Meridian Property Holdings is my business. I'm not looking for family investment, family involvement, or family advice about it. That separation has been healthy for me. It needs to stay that way. Understood, Dad said. But I added I'm open to being family again. Real family, not the performance we've been doing. That means honest conversations, genuine support, and actually spending time together beyond obligatory holiday dinners. I'd like that, Victoria said. Could we start a sisters' dinner thing? Once a month, just you and me. I'd love that, I said. We finished dinner with lighter conversation. Victoria's kids, Jennifer's work at the art museum, Mom's garden club, normal family topics, the kind we should have been discussing all along. As I prepared to leave, Dad walked me to my car. Catherine, he said, I meant what I said inside. I'm proud of you, and I'm sorry it took a public scene at Bellissimo for me to realize what you'd accomplished. I could have told you sooner, I admitted. I chose to keep it private partly to protect the business, but partly because I'd convinced myself you didn't care. I care, he said. I've always cared. I've just been terrible at showing it. We have time to figure it out, I said. If we're both willing to try. I am, he said. Willing to try. I drove home through quiet Sunday evening streets, processing everything that had happened over the past 48 hours. The confrontation at Bellissimo, the conversation with Marcus, the family dinner. My phone buzzed with a text from Antonio. Monday lunch service fully booked. The ownership reveals story has made us the hottest reservation in the city. Thank you for the publicity, even if it was unintentional. I smiled. Trust Antonio to find the business opportunity in family drama. Another text, this one from my lawyer. Hartman Hotel closing confirmed for Tuesday. Congratulations on acquisition number 18. 18 properties, 12 million in personal net worth. A family slowly learning to see me clearly. Not bad for the daughter they'd written off as a failure. I pulled into my building's garage, rode the elevator to my loft, and poured a glass of wine. The same Barolo from Friday night, still excellent. Tomorrow I'd return to the daily work of managing 17 properties and preparing to acquire the 18th. I'd meet with contractors, review financial reports, and make decisions about the future of buildings and businesses across the city. But tonight, I simply sat by my windows, watching the river flow past, grateful for the silence I'd built my empire in, and for the family that was finally beginning to understand what that silence had been protecting. The secret was out now. For better or worse, the Sterling family knew the truth about Catherine Sterling, the daughter who'd built an empire while they weren't paying attention, and somehow that felt exactly right.